Like a welcome back. Welcome back to another Synth Saturdays with me, your host, Young Chomsky. Looks like we're looking okay. I'll tell you what, every time spending like 30 minutes trying to get the good lighting, feeling like Joe Biden. Hopefully it looks okay on your screen, in your home, or wherever it is that you're watching. Hopefully this Synth Saturday finds you in good health. I'm very excited about this. We've got a real jam-packed program for you. I'm gonna just pull this up and see if y'all made it in here. This is gonna be the first Synth Saturday with a musical guest, a guest that I'm really excited about. We are gonna have Dan Boeckner, the man, the myth, the legend. Of Wolf Parade, Handsome Furs, Operators, real heavyweight in the world of music, indie rock, electronic music. Very, very excited. So we're going to have him join in just a bit. Let's see if I can bring up the chat here. So, cool. Oh shit, now I'm hearing myself. I don't want that. Don't want to hear myself. Just before we get started, well, I don't know what to do about that. Tell you, we had like a 90-minute sound check before this because it turns out that audio's fine. Well, that's good. I don't know. It's actually really complicated to play synth music on a stream from two different places at once. Well, I don't know. Maybe it'll clear up. Not really sure what we can do. Hopefully, y'all can kind of bear with it. Audio sounds good. I mean, that's the most important part, right? Let me see. I'm trying to close out of some things here. Maybe it'll clean itself up. That being said, so before we bring Dan in and see what he's up to, and hear a little music from him, I want to pick back up with our quick little, I was going to say Synth Secrets, which was a long-running series in Sound on Sound magazine. Real heads know about that one. But I don't know, it's a little tutorial series that we've been doing here because, we like to consider this an edutainment stream. And that's what you come to TrueAnon for. We like to laugh, but we like to learn and live and love. So, yeah, we're going to not spend too long on this, but I thought we'd pick back up and do a little more of our Synthesizer 101 series. So today, I'm going to talk about LFOs, which are very powerful and very interesting, just like me. So come on over here, won't you? Steadicam time. Oh, let's see. Can I do this? Yeah. All right, so... we talked before. Let's see. That looks good. I'm going to demonstrate again today with my trusty JU06A, which you'll recall this is a modern digital miniature remake of the Roland Juno 60. So this was an 80s analog synthesizer. And we talked about a couple of aspects of this synth. So I'm going to go into manual mode here. We talked about oscillators, DCO, digitally controlled oscillator, and that is what gives us our basic pitch. Actually, I need to. This is awkward. With one hand, I've got to put this camera down for 1 second. Sorry, folks. Turn local off. Okay, back to it. So, whoops, why am I Okay, so our oscillators, we've got sawtooth wave, we've got square wave, and we've got our sub. So that is what gives us our basic timbre, right? Then we talked about our VCF, voltage controlled filter. Sorry if you can't see that, I am at the limit of my cable. But we talked about low pass filter, right? If I hold, okay, bring this down. That's our low pass filter, right? It's cutting off the high frequencies. So what we're going to get into with the LFO, that stands for low frequency oscillator. And you can see that section right over here. And what you just heard me doing, actually, was kind of a preview of what the LFO does. As I was manually moving that slider up and down, you might have noticed that had kind of a musical effect to it, right? Let me do that again. So I'm going to hold this note. I turned on this button hold. So that means that I can just play a note and it's going to sustain itself. And now I'm going to just rock that slider up and down rhythmically. And that's got kind of a nice sound to it, right? That has a musical quality to it. So what if I wanted to do that without using my hand? If I wanted to, automate that, let's say. An LFO is one way to do that. So that periodic motion of sliding something up and down is the same kind of periodic motion that a wave has. It's cyclical, just like a sound wave, but it's much slower than a wave that you could hear. So that is basically the meaning of low frequency oscillator. It's low frequency in that it is lower than the frequency that in the audio range, right? So we measure frequencies in hertz, and that is how many cycles per second it is. So getting a little bit technical here for a second, but the range that humans can hear is typically defined as 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. And depending on your age and your hearing ability, it's less than that, right? You start to lose that upper range, especially as you age. But below, 20 hertz is like a super, super deep bass note. And that means 20 cycles per second, going back and forth 20 times every second. If you get lower than 20 hertz, you're not in the audio range anymore. It's not a sound that you can hear. But that's when you start to get into that low frequency oscillator range. So here is what that does. We can set our LFO, and you'll see in the VCF, the filter section, there is a slider labeled LFO. So what does that mean? That means that we are applying the LFO to the frequency cutoff. So if I take this note and I hold it, and then I start to bring the LFO up, you're going to hear that periodic movement. And now I have controls of the rate. How quickly or how slowly it does it. And I can change, by changing this slider, it's how deep, how extreme that effect is. So I can make it really subtle, I can make it really intense. So I'm applying that periodic movement there to the filter cutoff. I can also apply it other places, the same concept. We've got another knob, another slider labeled LFO in the oscillator section. So it's the same idea, but here we're going to apply it not to the filter cutoff, but to the pitch. So here is what that sounds like. If you can predict in your mind what you're going to hear, we're taking that same periodic movement and applying it to the pitch, right? So we're going to get a vibrato effect. So listen as I start to bring this up. So as I bring that up, it's more intense, wider vibrato, and then I can change the rate. and we can do both at once. So this synthesizer is simple. It only has a single LFO. So as we apply that to if we apply it to the pitch and the filter cutoff, we're only controlling, there's only one LFO to apply, but a more complicated synthesizer might have multiple LFOs, and we could route them differently, and we could have one applying to the filter cutoff, we could have one applying to the pitch. We might have multiple oscillators, and we could have multiple LFOs applying to different oscillators. We could apply one to the volume, but it's all the same idea, right? So we can bring this back now to what I talked about 2 weeks ago on the stream. If hopefully this is clicking a little bit, we're just taking a waveform and we're using it to what's called modulate some other source of sound. So modulate just means change. You know, it's the same way we use that term in music theory. A modulation means a key change. We can be in the key of C or whatever, and then we can modulate to the key of G or whatever. It means we're changing. So we're using one source here, an oscillator, to change some other destination, whether it's the pitch of another oscillator or it's the cutoff point of a filter, or like what we were doing with, let me just make a whole new pattern here. Here's a hi-hat, right? So let's say I just do 16th notes on this hi-hat, and I'll also just put quarter notes on the kick, and I'll put the snare on 2 and 4. So, whoops. And let me just speed that up. Okay, so that's pretty boring sounding, but what we talked about 2 weeks ago, how to use an LFO with this, is I can take this hi-hat sound and I can actually take an LFO and make as my destination the sample start, and now start to apply it. And it's a little subtle, right? But if you can hear that, especially, let me drop the snare out. You hear how that starts to get this kind of push and pull to it. Like, so hopefully you guys can hear that. It definitely comes through on my side. So that is another application of the same idea. So that is about what I wanted to say about LFOs. I mean, the concept is you learn it once and you can use it anywhere. And I see that that Dan has entered the arena. So let me take a look at the chat. What's up, buddy? Hold on. So I need to now change. I was saying we had a very complicated audio setup, so I'm gonna have to switch some things around and throw on my headphones so that we can talk. And I think now I will be able to hear you. How's it going? You with me? Hey, what's up, buddy? All right, we did it. So, yes, this was a 90-minute process to get this going. Yeah, but here we are. We solved almost all the problems. Nice. My my webcam is stacked on an EMT textbook and several strength training books. So, yeah. Nice. You gotta educate yourself about herbs. Oh, can't hear Dan. Um, that that makes sense that they can't hear you, given. Okay, well, it's the same solution. We're gonna do this.
I'm not gonna.
Okay, talk now.
Hello.
Are we hearing Dan now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're really hacking the system here, but I think
Is it happening?
I think they can hear you.
Okay. All right. It's good.
Cool. All right. So good. That would have been bad. We would have had to abort. We're good. All right. So Dan, thank you for joining us. How the hell are you?
I'm good. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about being bored or sad in quarantine.
Yeah.
And besides, like, losing what is 90% of the way I make money, which is touring, besides that, I'm doing fucking great.
Yeah.
I love it. I love to be at home. I love to play synthesizers.
Yes.
I love to expand my mind by reading.
Nice.
I love to take nighttime walks in the park and be a ghoul. And
So
yeah, no, I'm enjoying it.
Where are you? Can you disclose your location for the audience?
Yes, I'm in a radiation-proof bunker in Montreal, Canada. I'm in the last. It's like the Hitler bunker of MK Ultra, which they did here a few blocks away from here. So yeah, this is where MK Ultra ended. So
Sick. And so
I'm here with Boeckner from Operators, exfiltrated her from the United States.
Okay, so at least you don't have to quarantine totally alone.
No, I also have a dog that has diarrhea today, so
Oh, shit.
so we're all stuck here in the bunker. So
Well, we've all been there. So where you just were like coming off tour not too long before this shit hit the fan, no pun intended.
Yeah, that's right. We saw you in San Francisco
Yeah, that show was great.
at the famous Fillmore. That was really nice to see you guys there.
Yeah, and so did you had totally finished that tour, or did you actually get cut short, or what happened?
We finished it. So we finished the North American leg. So basically, we crammed like 3 weeks, or no, like 6 weeks of touring into 3 weeks, I guess. And which in retrospect was probably a pretty good idea. And then we had our last show in New York, and we had 4 days off before we were supposed to go to Europe. And I'd been following like the sort of progression of the virus, and especially Italy. Like I know you guys had Mark Ames on recently. Like Mark's a friend of mine, and just like talking to him and listening to his interviews with Annibale on the Warner, and Annibale's really stark depiction of like what was going on the ground in Italy scared the fucking shit out of me. So we collectively canceled our tour in Europe, and we got a lot of shit for it too from some promoters and the company that we were renting equipment and the band from.
Like they thought everything was still gonna happen.
Yeah, I got an email basically calling me a pussy, quote unquote, for not going on a tour. And then like a week later, it was just a hell zone. So I'm glad we canceled. Yeah, and I came back to Montreal, and then Boeckner came back from the States to Montreal, and we're here.
So you guys basically, you were gonna have a European tour that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And you were telling me recently that like the touring situation is a shit show basically for the next
2 years
time.
probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fucking bad. Like I'm not sure who's interested in this, but I don't know. Fuck it. I'm just gonna talk about it. So there's been a vibe with booking agents and bands, which is this kind of cautious optimism that, or maybe stupid optimism that like things would get better in the fall, that everything would go back to normal. And you know, the touring market's so oversaturated already because it's the only way anybody makes any money. Like no one's making money in record sales unless like you've got, you know, some kind of financial backing. Being in a band, you have to go on tour. So that market was already crowded, and there's like a month and a half worth of missing shows now. Plus every band that wanted to put a record out right now had touring plans. So you've got this huge backlog, and then you have all these small businesses like independent clubs going out of business. They're like closing their doors. So like Great Scott in Boston has been open for 44 years, like closed yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's like a bloodbath, basically. And the last thing that I heard from a friend of mine who books shows in Toronto was that they are accepting bookings for spring of 2022, and it's super competitive.
Yeah.
So people are, and it's a buyer's market. So clubs are basically like, yeah, you want a show? We're going to give you half your fee.
So that sounds pretty bleak. Is there a silver lining? Is there some way that
Say what?
You know, is there maybe any way to look at this that something good can come out of it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, this system, this economic model is completely unsustainable without coronavirus. Like it was, you know, all young bands are getting squeezed super hard because everybody's on the road. So it's really hard to book shows if you're just starting out, you know, and it's extremely competitive. And post financial collapse, people don't have as much disposable income for entertainment outside of maybe the big coastal cities. So, you know, it's a hard market to begin with. And I think the exit strategy is to just go full Fugazi. It was basically like, if all of these clubs, these mid-level clubs are going out of business or being bought up by like AEG or huge conglomerates, I think the answer is to just book church basements, book curling arenas, whatever, book a fucking community center, book things in the suburbs, and build your own stage, you know, pay a little extra to hire people to, like security essentially. But I think this model of like touring and making a shitload of money and having everything underwritten by liquor sales is over. It's done. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You know, it's gonna be interesting at least.
And so you were just touring with Wolf Parade, but Operators is your other project, and you guys just kick-started or started up your Patreon, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Boeckner and I have been kind of planning on putting together Patreon for like half a year now, and mainly because, like, basically what I was saying about touring, it's just the amount of people between fans or like people who are interested in paying for art and people who make art, the amount of like sort of parasitical management class that sits between that is just exponentially grown over the last like decade. So we thought, fuck it, like Patreon seemed like a good idea to be able to put out just weird shit, you know? Like we made a kind of an instrumental record that we had no idea what to do with, and now we can put it up on Patreon.
Nice.
So we just launched that, and it feels good. It's nice. You get to talk to people directly.
Yeah.
You know.
So you said you put out the instrumental record. Do you have anything else that you can tell people that they can expect to get if they get onto the Patreon?
Yeah. Well, we're doing new material too. So we have this thing where like we get demoitis.
What's that?
Demoitis is like a terminal condition where like when you write something and you write it in the demo phase, you're super hot. You're like, you're in touch with the lightning bolt of the muse, and maybe it's a little rough and it sounds like shit, but there's an energy to it, and you can never once you reach a certain point, you can never release that stuff. So with Patreon, we're going to be able to like put that pure kind of uncut shit out, which is really exciting. Because it doesn't feel right to put it out on a label for some reason, but it feels right to be able to share it on Patreon. So there's that, and then I did like maybe 2-3 hours worth of sort of generative modular synth music, like fake soundtracks for science fiction movies I want to see. And I just mastered all of that, and we're releasing that for Patreon, and then as like a double cassette, you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's exciting, man. I'm looking forward to hearing that. I feel you on the demoitis. I mean, for me, that's really fun about doing the TrueAnon stuff. It's two episodes a week, and I just like stay up real late. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna record something for this, and put it out. And there's no like I can't, labor over it too much. Because I have that disease.
Do you demo that stuff? Like, do you record like sort of proto versions of?
Most of that shit is just like want, fire, and forget, which like feels so good.
Right. How do you, and are you? I wanted to talk to you about it because I know you use a Digitech.
Yeah.
The Electron Digitech.
And that's the digitone that I'm looking at right now.
It has no song mode, right? Like,
correct.
so you basically can't do verse, chorus. You have to manually input it or put it in chain mode.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always interesting, and I deliberately, have made a lot of these choices, right? Because I think the tools you use affect the process, and that affects how things sound, right? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a person, and if you watch the things that I do on these streams, I'm not somebody who like is super fast fingered, really complex Digitech performance. But yeah, I mean, I like to just like build up tracks, bring things in and bring things out, and I definitely take a different approach with it than I used to make things all on the computer.
When you make this stuff for TrueAnon, are you generally using like 2 or 3 patterns and just muting and unmuting and then like live tweaking?
Yeah. Well, and I think my really high level approach is, and so I actually went to school for music, and this is like one of those little nuggets that stays with you. I had a professor who was like, talking about real composition, and they were like, I composed the 2D sections first, meaning the section in the orchestra where everyone plays together. And then I work backwards from there, and like that's really how I think. Like I go and I do the part where everything's happening at once, and then I'm like, all right, how am I going to get here? So then I take things away from there, and that's a nice way to work. And the other workflow I have is like if I find a sample that just speaks to me, I'm like that fucking thing of Trump saying the brand names or whatever, Sometimes it's super easy.
Sequences are really good for that. I find when I first started getting into electronic music or like working with sequencers, because electronic music is maybe not the right word, but when I started Handsome Furs, I got this like Korg Electrab EMX, which was like a big metal blue box for like British kids to make shitty drum and bass music in the basement. And it came out around the time that like 909s and 303s like tripled or quadrupled in value. So just working with that, I would kind of take the same approach. Like I would build the part that achieved maximum totalizity and then remove stuff from there.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, I guess, obviously like you write songs in Wolf Parade as well as operators, and you're using some electronic elements in Wolf Parade, like there's that one, then I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but Wolf Parade put out a new record earlier this year. That one track that starts with that kind of galloping synth.
Against the Day.
Yes, I fucking love that part. It's like that triple time. That's so cool. But anyway, the point is, I don't know. I guess I'm interested in what is your process, or like, how does it feel different approaching that stuff versus operators? Is it like totally different for you, or is it just kind of a different flavor?
I mean, it's different at a couple levels. I guess it's different because with Wolf Parade, I'm working with Spencer and Harlan, and we have we generally, like, our songwriting process is either Spencer and I will bring in, like, a chord progression, and then, because we're kind of a Marxist collective, it's just like, you abandon your emotional attachment to it. You dissolve your ego into the team, and then it mutates and becomes something new. So I can't even remember how that song started, like how we started writing it. But I do remember at one point we were all just like, this sounds like something from the Lost Boys soundtrack, and we need to embrace that.
Yeah, sick.
But yeah, and then with operators, it's mainly Boeckner and I just talking about non-musical stuff, and that will usually inspire one or both of us to write something. It's more like environmental, almost like you want to create like a landscape for this imagined world that you're talking about.
For sure.
It's more like world building. Wolfbright is more like capital S songwriting.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. Well, let's talk about some synths. So, you want to give us kind of an overview of your rig there, how you have everything, what you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, sadly the webcam is not in play, but
you can see everything.
so basically, this setup right here, the core of the setup is the Electron Digitone, which is their FM synth. It's like simplified FM synthesis.
So FM means what for our new?
Means frequency modulation. So like with a synth like this, which I believe you have too. Yes. Oh, look at that shit. Yeah, with the synth like the base station, you're dealing with like traditional subtractive synthesis. So, you've got a filter, oscillators, VCA, envelope, whatever. With the digitone, you've got a filter and ADSR and all that stuff, but the synthesis method is you're basically taking sine waves and you're modulating them with another source, usually another sine wave, and you are adding amounts of modulation. And what you get from it is you get like a very classic 80s sound. FM synths are really good at doing like percussive stuff and bell sounds.
Yeah.
And they sound, like a word that's used to describe them frequently is glassy. They have a very glassy sound. Or actually the Seinfeld bass is Yamaha DX7, which is a famous.
It's like the classic.
Famous FM synth.
Yeah.
And they were totally derided for years, and I'm not sure why they've kind of come back in popularity, but I love this thing. I think it sounds amazing. And then next, so chained to that, I have another Electron box called the Model Cycles, which is a dumbed down version of the digitone that's more based on percussion. So it uses a simplified FM engine to make percussive sounds like kick, snare, hat, and basses. And then supplementing that, I've got this thing, which is the Make Noise No Coast, which is basically it's like a standalone modular, desktop modular, and it's a buchla, so it's like a West Coast synthesis.
Which I don't know anything about that shit.
I just recently got into it, like over the last couple of years. I bought, actually I'll pull it down. I bought this, which anybody who's watching this and wants to get into West Coast synthesis that doesn't want to spend a shitload of money, buy a Korg Volcom modular. It's amazing. It's like you could write a whole record on that thing. West Coast synthesis is more sort of experimental, generative, definitely not as user-friendly maybe as East Coast stuff, but it's not really supposed to be. You're supposed to find happy accidents with it, and I really tried to embrace that, like in songwriting, like in the last couple of years. And then I've got the base station too, and the other thing that I'm using is, if you can see that little pink box sort of sitting out by the speaker, it's a Chase Bliss mood pedal, and it's kind of like a granular looper and a really like lo-fi delay and reverb, and I love it. It's really hard to clock it, and it's kind of like uncontrollable, but you get all these like weird happy accidents with it. So yeah.
Nice. So is this is your setup that you're working with right now and making new stuff with?
Yeah. I mean, well, this is what I wanted to do for the stream.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of using this as a songwriting, like basic songwriting base, and then usually if I'm getting really heavy into MIDI, I'll use the Octatrack. So I have another Electron sequencer called the Octatrack, which is basically like a DAW in a box, but it's super powerful for MIDI. So you can control about I think 8 remote MIDI devices, and then sample them in real time back into the machine.
Yeah.
Kind of chop them up. It's great for songwriting. We use it in Boeckner uses it in operators when we play live. But yeah, that's my jam right now.
Awesome. All right. Anything in particular you want to show off on any of those, or you want to get into your piece that you're going to perform?
I could just kind of give an example of what some of this stuff sounds like.
Yeah, I'd love to on the digitone or.
Yeah. So that's like kind of a really nice detuned FM pad. That's very FM.
Yeah.
So you got these kind of inharmonic metallic quality to it, you know? That's classic like FM bass. And then pad. And then on the MIDI side, this is the Buchla, the no coast. And you get some nice detuning with it. So this patch, I'm sending a random voltage to the pitch. So every time I hit a note, it's gonna randomly detune it.
That's sick.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then this is just the model cycles.
So you said the model cycles it's FM based synthesis doing that percussion. It's not samples.
No.
There's another box that does samples.
No, it's basically like a dumbed down version of the. Dumbed down is a bad word. Way
Just like
to
a simpler.
describe it. It's a sort of streamlined version of the digitone where each engine or sound engine is specifically tailored for kick drum, snare, synth. They have a chord engine, which is this
cool.
thing, which is really nice. It's very old digital dub, like early dance hall. You can get some like really crunchy kind of 8-bit sounds out of it. And then this is the bass station, which weirdly is, I think out of all this stuff, the most versatile. It's like, it doesn't have its own character.
Right.
It I don't know, it's not like a synth with its own sound, but it's really deep, and it's you can kind of sculpt it.
Yeah, so. It's a workhorse.
Yeah.
Real bread and butter.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love those FM sounds were great. I mean, you could sample that and get people to pay for it.
I don't know. Maybe that's next on the Patreon, just doing sample packs.
Yeah, I'll be first in line.
You know.
Cool. Well, you wanna play for us?
Yeah. So I, 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 It's not entirely sequenced, so it's we'll see what happens.
Cool. I'm gonna turn up a little bit. Hopefully everybody can hear okay. And yeah, whenever you're ready.
I'm gonna put the mic down.
Hell yes, that was so sick.
Thanks, man.
The chat was loving it.
That was fun as hell.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. So I want to just read out one comment. Somebody, Gerthio says, "This music reminds me of the last time I got abducted by aliens and they gave me an embarrassing haircut." I was feeling that too.
That's good. I like that.
That was awesome. Yeah, so apparently our video is coming through real choppy, but the audio sounds good, so that's really good. And apparently, I think it's adding to the vibe. It's kind of got like a strobe effect. So yeah, that was super cool, man. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me do it. I've been playing a lot of old RPGs, so.
Nice. Which ones?
Like the first 3 Dragon Warriors.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like NES stuff, like in an emulator. But the music in that, and also Castlevania 2 and 3. But the music in those is just like, it's so economical. And
Yeah. Because they had like, it was like 2 oscillators and like a noise, and that's it.
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah, and big melodies. Like
Yeah.
you had to sort of impose the melody on it, and you had to kind of have it. All the phrases had to be loopable, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Had to
love
be
that shit.
earworms.
That one song from the DuckTales game. You know, it's like
Oh hell yeah!
the Going to the Moon or something. I listen to that. I go back to that all the time. That's like, I mean, some of those things have had such staying power that they made with like such limited resources. It's great.
Yeah, like the Metroid
Yeah.
soundtrack. The original Metroid soundtrack is honestly like an incredible piece of composition.
Yeah.
Like just the opening sequence is just it's basically like one noise oscillator and a square wave.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's look at the chat. Anybody out there have questions for Dan? Now's your chance. Also, if you thought that track sounded fucking awesome, go to patreon.com/operators. That's the URL, right? Just /operators.
Yep.
Cool, and you will be able to get a lot more stuff like that. So make sure to check that out. All right, so who's got some cues for Dan to A?
We'll answer just about everything. What's going on out there?
What's Dev's deal with synths? Can you be more specific?
Yes. Her deal with them is that she's really good at programming.
Somebody, I guess, I'm gonna translate here. Well, so you've got a pretty big back catalog. You've been in a bunch of different, if you've got a few different projects over the years. If somebody's like brand new to your work, what would you say is the best entry point? Maybe is like your newer stuff, your start at the beginning, or how would you tell them to approach it?
I mean, I'm very invested in the last few things I've done.
Sure.
But, I would definitely say like Radiant Dawn, like the Operator's record, Radiant Dawn is sort of like aesthetically, politically, and musically where I'm at right now. That's anything that comes next is sort of built off of that foundation. But yeah, there's a lot to jump into. I think some of the Handsome Fur stuff holds up pretty well. Like the last record we made is a lot of like FM and like weird cheap digital synths.
Yeah.
We Operators recently did like a tour where we played a bunch of Handsome Fur songs, and I was really happy coming back to this.
Nice.
Yeah, jump in anywhere.
Yeah. Let's see. So I know that obviously we're both kind of taking this hardware approach, but somebody's asking about VSTs. I've talked about in the past. I used to work on the computer, and there's some VSTs that I like. Do you have
Yeah.
any are there any software instruments that you recommend for people that are maybe not ready to jump into hardware, or like what's been your experience there?
Definitely. I would say like three off the top of my head. Arturia has a Buchla clone, like a music easel clone
Mm-hmm.
software. It's the Buchla V, and I just bought it because it was half off. I had a crack of it before, and I was like, I'm gonna get a legit copy. But it's as close as you can get to like a $4,500 instrument
Yeah.
on your laptop, and it's a joy to play. Like, it's not something you're probably gonna write songs on, but it would definitely. It's more of a spiritual meditative device, to sort of unlock hidden potentials inside there. So there's that. I would also say like the IVCS3. So
Mm-hmm.
the synth that the VCS3 was like the synth that Brian Eno used in Roxy Music and on his first solo records. Per Ubu, also famously like one of the greatest American bands, if not the greatest American band of the 1970s, used it, and it's like the physical VCS3 is a box with a joystick
Yeah.
and and like a pin matrix that you put plastic pins in to make connections. And they're like $14,000. They're absurdly expensive. So if you get the IVCS3 is like an app for iPad or your phone, and it's indistinguishable in sound, like as far as I'm concerned.
I want to say it was maybe not that but like a similar model on Bowie's Heroes that was
Yeah,
playing.
yeah, that's right. And then I guess the last thing, and it's free, is if anybody's interested in getting into modular, which is like a really good way to learn synthesis. I
Mm-hmm.
think like if you want to learn how to get the most out of like your base station or whatever, modular is a good place to go. But it's like prohibitively expensive.
Sure.
It's fucking absurd. It's like you could spend 10 grand on like a nice system, but there's this thing called VCV Rack,
Mm-hmm.
which is a free download, and a lot of sort of like famous or exceptional modules are recreated for VCV Rack. So they look exactly the same. A lot of them have like the sort of blessing of the manufacturers, and it's just a virtual environment where you can have a huge modular synthesizer for free. And I totally recommend it for anyone who's interested in that stuff. It's a no-brainer. It sounds amazing. You can connect it to a MIDI keyboard, so you can it's usable for writing songs or adding accompaniment or whatever. But yeah, it's free, which is good.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I suspect you're on the same page. I think that a lot of things about hardware for me, it's like makes me more productive and efficient with my workflow. All that said,
Yeah,
like these days, especially, I think 20 years ago it was really different, but like the state of software now, it's really great way to jump in. You're not
mm-hmm.
sure, but you're interested. If you're watching the Young Chomsky synth stream, you're like, these guys are cool. How can I be that cool? I want to get into synthesis.
Yeah,
Download some shit and play with it. There's a whole world out there. It's really great to learn. I mean, I'm really into taking a very technical approach. I like to like really dig into the nuts and bolts and understand shit. Some people like to just push buttons and knobs and kind of learn more intuitively. Whatever approach works for you, but it's very accessible with software. So
yeah. Software is a good gateway, and then like you have to ask yourself like what do you want to do? Do you want to do you want a sequencer? Do you want something that's going to be able to you're going to be able to arrange stuff on, or do you want something you can kind of like go deeper and explore
yeah.
synthesis wise?
And yeah, and of course it's a great starting point to be like, I like operators, what do they use? Let me like try to use that. And then of course you learn more, and it's like, well, you can get similar sounds with a lot of other things. You don't have to use the exact same gear, but like,
Yeah.
when I was 16 and getting into guitar, I was like, oh shit, what guitar does Blink-182 play, and then I was like, I gotta have that guitar.
Yeah.
That's a great way to
Yeah.
dip your toes in.
Yeah.
Cool. Here's
I,
a. Sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, like, for hardware on the cheap end of things, like there's a revolution of like cheap analog hardware.
Yeah.
And cheap, good sounding digital hardware. So, a friend of mine uses the Novation circuit,
Mhm.
which is, I think it's under $400 US, and it's like a fully functional workstation, and it's got like control voltage out and MIDI out, and you can build synth patches on it, and you could write like an entire album on it.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that is a really good place to start, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool time to get into this. I mean, even when I was first starting to like get into home recording, it's changed a lot since then. But I mean, I can't imagine trying to do this stuff. I don't know. Again, like 20 or 30 years ago, it would have been like
Yeah.
really hard and expensive. But like, I was trying to do this shit in high school, and it was a lot. But I was like pirating software, and it was like, oh, I gotta figure out Pro Tools, and yeah, it just gets easier and more accessible all the time.
Totally.
Cool. Here's an interesting question. I think. So somebody wants to know. Fartboy100 wants to know.
Fartboy 100.
Is there a specific process for choosing art for your albums? Every project you've been involved with always has extremely awesome album art.
Yeah, I mean, with Wolf Parade, it was for a couple of years, was basically our friend Matt Mraz. We would just play him the record and he would make album art for it. Because we kind of implicitly trusted him. But for stuff like Hanson Furs and Operators, it's the music kind of comes first, and then, you know, how to say it? I guess like once the album is taking shape, I can kind of see like a world that it lives in that's maybe not this world. It's maybe an alternate timeline, and then I start thinking about like what would pop music art look like from that timeline. So with Radiant Dawn, we got Simon Roy, who's an incredible graphic novelist. He did this. He's mostly like science fiction. He did this thing called Habitat about a generation ship and cannibalism, and and he's Canadian. I hit him up, and we basically were like, we need you to render an object that is exerting like extreme psychic and space-time disruption on the population of Earth. And he came up with this like, repeating pyramid. So yeah, I don't know. It's usually like trying to build like a filmic or like environmental background to the record.
Nice.
And then just trying to pick people who are. The worst thing you could do is like talk to your record label or your management about like who you should get to do art. Yeah. That's the dumbest fucking thing you can do, because they're gonna be like, oh, you should use this person. They did X, Y, and Z. But yeah, no, it's better to just like imagine the coolest record cover and then reach out to people who are good at art.
Yeah, well, that's the most important and most valuable thing, right? When you have pre-existing relationships with people that you already like implicitly trust.
Yeah, I think that goes across like even like just the functional aspects of touring.
Yeah.
Like you just work with not necessarily just like pals, but like pals with skills.
Yeah, love it. All right, here's a good one. I don't know. Maybe we can end here. I don't know if what actually. So I'm bad with geography. What time is it where you are?
It is 11:02.
Okay, yeah, it's late for you. I don't know. You have other things to do. But let me put this to you, and we can let you go if you need to go. But what are you most looking forward to when we're able to be normal people out in the world again?
I'm looking forward to playing shows.
Yeah.
Because, that's, I mean, for me, that's the only real reason I'm doing this. Like, I don't. I never went to therapy, you know. Like, I don't. I don't discount it, but for me, like, I was lucky enough to find this thing that I like to do that is, and then be lucky enough to be able to do it in front of a bunch of people that is just pure catharsis and sort of an exchange of emotional energy. So even like the smallest show, like Operators, last summer we toured for a month and a half in Eastern Europe. We ended up as far as Odessa and as far north as Moscow, you know. And some of the shows we played were pretty small, but even at those shows, there's a exchange of energy between the band and the audience that is something that is unquantifiable, you know? Like, it's not something you can put a dollar amount on, it's not something you can put on a streaming platform, it's not something you're gonna experience even if you buy the record. You have to be there, and that's what I miss. It's like an intangible, it's a conjuring, you know? It's like doing an incantation.
Yeah.
And I miss that, and you can only do that in front of people, with people in a room. And until this stops, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I have to, figure out different ways.
Yeah.
This is good. Like, I tonight was fun.
Yeah.
I feel good about this. But there is the feeling of being physically in a space with somebody.
For sure.
But this will do.
No.
Do for me for now.
I understand completely. I mean, like, first of all, I'm so grateful for everyone tuning in. I mean, I'm really glad we have this technology. I'm glad that we have people that are interested. Having said that, though, it's like a very different experience, right? Like, ultimately, I am in a room, in a studio apartment where I live alone. There's no one else here. I am talking to this unblinking black eye. It's super fun to do this, but like having been on stage, you know, not too long ago, and like having planned to do that again right when this all came down and got canceled, and like that possibility got foreclosed on, like it's very different, and it's just not the same experience. So I'm glad we can do this, but I yearn for that again. Yeah,
it's good, but it's like feeling without touching, you know.
Yeah. It's Demolition Man when they put on the VR headsets, because that's how they have sex in the future.
It's strange days, like. But you guys had a tour, and you were gonna do like live accompaniment. You were telling me.
Yeah, I had these very ambitious plans, and who knows? I mean, you know, I think that will happen again, but it's all very uncertain. But yeah, I mean, totally what you're saying. It's like that exchange of energy with the audience. It's like that's what you, as a performer, that's what you live for. That's what like keeps you. And there's a lot of pain, you know, as you know, I'm sure even better than I do. But I was talking, I guess, on my last stream about like some of my worst tour story, and I'm sure you have some too. But like we suffer through that shit because of that high that you get on stage when you have that back and forth with the audience, and that's
like if you're in a fucking, you know, like a minivan driving 10 hours between like Bozeman, Montana and your next show, and all you've eaten is like gas station coffee and corn nuts, and you want to die. But then you get to wherever you're playing, and you get on stage, and it's an insane life, because you're spending 14 hours of your day getting ready to spend 90 minutes on stage, and if you're not a total asshole, you're spending 14 hours to spend 90 minutes to be totally authentic and open to people, you know, and just hollow yourself out. Like, that's, I don't know, it's a dumb job, but it's worth something.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, and not to get, you know, very, I don't know, theoretical about it, but I think what you just said is really important, right? Because you have that opportunity to be yourself completely on stage, whereas under, like, your typical kind of capitalist worker, you do not, you go to your job and you experience alienation because you cannot be your full self at your job. You have to be someone else. You have to be disciplined, and you are alienated from your labor. You are alienated from yourself. And, through all the different jobs I've worked, I've never been a musician, an artist full time. Always had to have some other job, and that is the experience that I cannot escape. I'm at my job, and even if I kind of like what I'm doing, even if I'm paid well, even if I like the people around me, it's like I am not myself when I'm here. But when you're on stage,
you're still suppressing your, you're suppressing your identity.
Yeah. But in those 90 minutes.
But in those 90 minutes, you don't entirely transcend the capitalist structure because it is a transactional experience, but in an emotional state, like divested from that, you do transcend it. And I'd like to think, like, if you're good at your job, you help the audience transcend it. I've talked to my friends a lot about, like, the idea that music, the boomer idea that music is political.
Mm-hmm.
Like a song could stop napalm falling on Cambodia.
Yeah.
Which is absolute fucking dog shit, like it's not real. But I think where music is beneficial and political is kind of a psychic balm, right? Like if everybody is eating shit and everybody feels the same sort of nameless badness, they can at least get into a room, someone is on stage, and then there's like a transfer of energy, and for a little while it dissolves and you're somewhere else, and hopefully you feel better after it's over. That's the political function of music, I think.
Yeah. Well, on that note, to next year at the Fillmore, as the saying goes. Well, Dan, thank you so much for doing this. It was a blast. Thanks
for having me, man.
Yeah, as a reminder to everybody, go to patreon.com/operators, and both to check out the really cool stuff that Dan is putting out, and and to support Dan in this time when a lot of musicians, is thrown into this chaotic moment where he had a tour canceled and they need help. So if you can sign up for the Patreon, I'm really excited to see what they're putting out. Anything else you want to talk about or leave us with?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on. This was a blast. I miss this.
Yeah, for sure. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can, and thanks for doing the sound check earlier. I know that was a little rough, but hopefully we can tighten up the technical issues and then have you back sometime in the future and do this again.
I would absolutely love that. And once nerds solve MIDI over Wi-Fi,
yes. Yeah, then we can do a real-time collab. All right, Dan, I will talk to you soon. Everybody stick around. I am going to close this out with a little performance, but let's all say thank you, Dan, and let's head over to his Patreon and get signed up.
All right, thank you, man.
Peace, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, have a good night.
You too.
All right, so that was Dan Boeckner from Wolf Parade and Operators. So I am just going to, there we go, and now I can take off my cans. Oof. All right, so hopefully you're all still with me. Let me just stick these somewhere. That was sick. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna do one last little jam that I prepared, and then see if anybody has any more questions, and then we'll call it a night. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, sorry again about the choppy video, but I understand that apparently everything was sounding good, so that's really what matters. Okay, So let's see. I am gonna turn us this way so we can get a shot, better view of that. And all right, this is a new one that I just made. A little jam. And yeah, I don't know how else to introduce this, but we will see how it goes. Cool. A couple of minutes into playing that, I got really nervous that I had fucked something up and like maybe nobody could hear it. But it looks like you did. Awesome. Well, I feel good. Is that gonna go on SoundCloud? I don't know. Maybe. Who can say? Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad the audio was good. Cool. Well, yeah, this was our first time doing the synth stream with a guest. I'm so stoked that we got Dan on. I didn't want to embarrass myself too much. But yeah, I mean, I've been listening to Wolf Parade since their first album came out in 2005, and I fucking love that shit. I said on the post I made to Patreon that first track on the first Wolf Parade album was like my go-to pump-up song in the gym for a while. The drums on that intro were just so nasty. They would just like really get me going. I mean, that whole record's so good. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I loved what he played. It's really fun to do this. Like I said, definitely miss being in a place where we can kind of have a real give and take with people. But I'm really glad that people are tuning in for this. It's really fun. So yeah, I can answer any questions anybody has for another couple minutes before we wrap this up. I know it's getting late for some of you, but for anybody in the chat, anything on your mind? Anybody else stuttering? I'll tell you who's stuttering. Joe motherfucking Biden. Heyo. How am I streaming the synth setup? I got Loopback is a software routing. I mean, the challenge with it, not to like bore everybody with the nerdy details, challenge is that most like audio applications will only receive 2 channels of audio, 1 and 2. And I have my mixer, obviously I have a bunch of devices here, so I have 12 channels of audio, and I want to send that over the stream to a program that's only going to receive 2 channels. So I use Loopback, which takes the 12 channels from my mixer and routes that in software into a virtual device with 2 channels. So that works. That's how I've done the stream before when it was just me, and that worked. The issue we were having was now having Dan connect to me and then take his audio and send that to the stream, as well as mine to him and mine to the stream. So there were more moving parts, and maybe we will figure it out a little better next time. But it seemed to work at a minimum level. Have I ever done P90X? I have not. I've done some CrossFit. Not going to get into my feelings about CrossFit, but you know what? If it works for you, that's great. I'm happy for you. Well, we're about to wrap this up, so I'm not gonna fuck with it right now. Would I fuck with a tape machine if you sent me one? Maybe. That'd be dope. I don't know. How do I feel about the Digitact? I feel like I talk about this every time. That's fine if you didn't hear me talk about it before. I like the Digitact a lot. It does have some, I think, it's had a few different bugs in its life cycle. They've made a few, firmware updates. I feel like it seems to me that there's still some bugs. That being said, I like most everything about it. I like its compact size. I like the workflow of it. I'm kind of particular about my tools. I like them to, I like to be able to get started right away. I have this little corner over here. I'll just give you the whole overview again, right? This is my little area. So I can just come up to this at any time and start making music. As opposed to going onto the computer and there's like a million distractions, or even if I had a hardware setup and there was some of these devices where you gotta like go through a lot of menus and Digitact is a lot shallower in the sense of everything's only like one level deep, which is good, right? Because you want to find the thing immediately. There's things it can't do, but that affects, your that just affect it shapes the product, right? It's like, I don't know, a painter using like a coarse brush. You can view that as like a limitation, which it is, but it's like that just shapes your style. So yeah, I like it a lot. It is the brains in my setup. It works for what I'm trying to do. There's different. It doesn't necessarily mean you make like only one kind of music. I don't know. It works for me. I don't know what else to say. What do I think of those Yamaha kind of synth organs? Not really sure which ones we're talking about. Yeah, I don't know. There's for Yamahas, they made the Reface series, which are neat. They are like small form factor mini keys. There was one that was an organ. There's one that was the like a DX7, which I actually had and sold. Didn't love it, but I don't know. I mean, some synths I've had and I just didn't take to. And also, I would have kept it if I had more space, but I got the Prophet 6 here, so had to get rid of it. But there was the CS. They all had the same kind of form factor, and there were a bunch of them, and people seem to really like those. I'm all about these new. I have the two Roland boutiques here. These newer kind of digital synths that are remakes of classic synths in a small box, because I don't have that much space to work with, so I think those are cool. Am I hosting another channel after this ends? Nope. But tomorrow, Liz and Brace will be back right here doing their classic brand of Liz and Brace. So tune in tomorrow. I think it will be 5 p.m. Pacific. Have I ever played any of the Volca synths? Yep. I have owned several of the Volcas. I think I had a Volca Beats, a Volca Keys, I had a Volca Sample. Those are the only ones I owned. I owned and sold all of them. Some of those, I have recordings online that feature those. Great to learn on. Dan mentioned earlier the Volca Modular, which I have never played with, but apparently that's like West Coast style. I think, especially again, if you're in that place where you're like, I'm not sure about, if you're interested in synthesis, if you're interested in getting into it, you like what you hear from, what I'm doing, what a guy like Dan is doing, you want to fuck with it on your own, but, you don't know that much. Volcas are a great way to get into it, depending on, like, your learning style. For some people, the software is like the perfect thing, but you might be more like me and like putting your hands on physical controls is a lot nicer for you. You get that instant, that tactile feedback. I really do feel that, and when I got that first Volca Keys, just instantly getting that, turning that filter and hearing what happens when you do it was so gratifying and helpful to like ingrain that understanding. I mean, I don't know how much it clicks when I'm like, this is a low pass filter and this is what it means and this is what it sounds like. Hopefully that makes some sense to somebody watching, but really putting your hands on one and getting it for yourself is the best thing. So Volcas are a great way to do that. Yeah, and they all have pretty severe limitations, but again, limitations are a way to kind of enhance creativity depending on how you look at it. Good question here. Interesting question that I could kind of talk about a lot of different ways. Question is, how much theory should someone getting into it look up? I mean, again, I think this is a really individual thing, right? For me, I grew up, when I was a kid, I was like not naturally a musician. In fact, you would have thought I mean, I was like tone deaf essentially. I did not grow up in a musical home. I had wasn't like made to play an instrument or take any music lessons. Nobody in my family played music. I mean, my parents like played, boomer type music around the house. Not to say that in a disparaging way, like Simon and Garfunkel, who I still love, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and that kind of stuff. But I just didn't have an ear at all. Like it was bad. And I, if you can believe it, was a theater kid. I was really into theater, but I could not sing, and I like would never. It was hard for me. This was like real caused angst because I wanted to like get roles in the musicals in high school, and I would not. I couldn't do it. I could not sing for shit. I just did not have an ear. And then for me, and obviously this is a different story when you're like trying to learn electronic music, but it really changed when I started like digging into some theory concepts. And I think like music theory makes it sound like it's this very, I don't know, complex, lofty thing. But for me, it was just like understanding, putting a structure on it, because music was this very nebulous, it was this big undifferentiated blob that made no sense to me. And then I was like, okay, like there is structure, there is logic to it. I don't know, that's just kind of how my mind works. And when I had that kind of understanding of it, and then I picked up the guitar, it was the same thing. It just really helped me kind of see patterns, and then I could hear it so much better. So, it really depends. Like some people are able to just sit down and have a real intuitive way of doing things, and music theory is really just a way of understanding patterns of how things have been done or how certain things fit together. So it's not like, oh, you must know this much theory before you do anything. And the kind of also there's a different type of theory that applies or that we could talk about in terms of electronic music, right? Like the shit that I'm talking about here, like what is an LFO, what is a filter, all that stuff is like electronic or like physics of sound type of stuff. I think that is a lot more important. Sound design and synthesis probably is more important to know than circle of fifths and key changes and stuff like that. Classical type music theory, although that does not hurt to learn. But this kind of music is not really going to have very complex harmony. That's kind of the nature of it. If you're writing this, I mean, not to say that it couldn't, I think that'd be cool, but if you start writing this kind of music and you're doing really complex harmonies and a lot of key changes and stuff, it starts to sound like a different kind of music. So yeah, I don't know, something to keep in mind. But yeah, if you're gonna get into synthesis and stuff, I definitely recommend learning about physics of sound and the parts of a synthesizer. But like read the manual if you buy a synth. Like most of them are pretty good. They explain the parts and then just play with it. I find it really satisfying to like know how to get those sounds that you've heard on your favorite records, and then you can start to take those pieces apart and put them together in your own compositions. So yeah, I don't know, it's a fascinating question. Like there's no, like I said, there shouldn't be like a prerequisite, but it's a never-ending story, as it were. Am I into modular synths? Yeah, look, modular synths are cool as hell. It's always been one of those things that I have kind of held myself back from getting into. I think Dan mentioned this, like modular is kind of notoriously so, like a rabbit hole. It's really expensive. It's once you start, the possibilities are so endless. I really like my hardware setup right now. I might, flip one of these and replace it with something else, at some point. This has been pretty consistent, this setup, for a while. Every so often I'll change a piece of this. But I really like the idea anyway of like knowing my tools, mastering them. I don't want to be the guy who's like too about buying new synths and like building a synth instead of making music, which that's kind of the cliche, is what happens to people who get into modular. But of course, it's like super cool, you know, being able to like build your dream, your ultimate synth. But yeah, you know, there's this. It can be this question, right? Like, are you a musician? Are you making music, or are you a sound designer? Are you just like sitting there all day trying to come up with the coolest patch? Which, you know, maybe is a false question, because sometimes like a really cool patch is the music in itself, especially with a modular where you can make really complex kind of generative patches, right? But you know, my sensibilities are a little more pop oriented, right? So the setup that I have kind of works for that. And yeah, I think that that's a pretty good place to wrap it up. But before we go, I do want to. There's someone I gotta give a shout out to. Let's see. So my good friend Victoria let me know about this. I'm gonna pull up her email. So Victoria is in the band the Downtown Boys. Hopefully some of you know that band. If not, you should check them out. But Victoria sent me this email and let me know that there is a musicians union and getting started called the UMAW, United Musicians and Allied Workers Union. So I just found out about this. It sounds super cool. So what she says is, if anyone wants to join, they can hit up umaw.organize@gmail.com. So they have a demand letter, and it's about our voices and our power as musicians and allied workers. And the other thing is and so the demands have to do with distributing unemployment benefits and regardless of immigration status, housing security, saving music venues, small businesses, nonprofits, and more. And so you can find those demands online. And there's also going to be a release show for this. And there's a flyer that I am going to post on Twitter. So the United Musicians and Allied Workers release show is going to be on May 4th, which is that Monday, at 6 o'clock. Not sure what time zone that is, if that's Eastern or Pacific, but I will try to confirm that. But this sounds super dope. So the release show is going to have Algiers, Dive, Naomi and Damon K, Evan Greer, Clear Channel's Mary and Awad, Jay Mamana, Ian O'Neill of Deer Tick, Unibrow, Stolen Jars, Sam Adler-Bell, and more. So it sounds like a really great lineup and really great cause. So thanks, Victoria, for letting me know about that. Like I said, I will post that on Twitter so everybody can follow up. And yeah, that being said, yeah, I think that this is a good place to leave it. Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me for another Young Chomsky synth stream. So yeah, we're gonna keep this thing rolling. I do have a couple other musical guests that I am working on in the pipeline that I'm really excited about. So stay tuned. Tell your friends. We're gonna try to do this every other Saturday. So I think next Saturday I'll be back with a classic gaming stream. Gonna come back with Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, and then the week after that we will be playing some more synths. And then so hope to keep that rotation going. And yeah, I think if all goes well, we will have another really cool guest in 2 weeks. So tune in tomorrow at 5, and you'll get your dose of Liz Embrace. And then I will see you here next week, same place, same time. So stay safe, stay healthy, and stay synthesizing, my friends. See you later.